Skylanders Imaginators. It kinda sucks. It's the last game developed by Activision, it's the worst Skylanders game in the series, I'd rather play Thought Force again, let's just get this over with. I don't want to do an intro. The story this time. So Chaos steals a book from Skylanders Academy's library because he's trying to find a way to use better mind magic to take over Skylands. 3 chapters later he meets the only remaining ancient, this brain who has mind powers and helps Chaos take over Skylands. This leads to him freeing the brain so he can mind control everyone. This mind control is in full effect for 1 chapter and pretty much doesn't exist afterwards. Yeah, this story is sort of just uninteresting and just doesn't feel like it has a proper overarching plot, which just doesn't work in this case. And it just doesn't have anything intriguing going on with a main antagonist, or at least what the game presents as a main antagonist. The overall tone of this game is a lot more jokey and doesn't take itself seriously at all, which I'm personally not a fan of. Chaos in the previous games, while being more of a comedic villain, actually posed a reasonable threat. The first game he had his face protection being fairly menacing looking and was taken as a serious threat. In the second game he was actively threatening considering he found a big powerful robot and then transformed into one. Heck, even just in the previous game to this one, he pretty much won right at the start. Even in the games where he was less threatening overall, there was still some threat that existed, whether it be the Doom Pack, I honestly don't remember their names, or Chaos's mother. Here, neither the brain or Chaos felt like any threat at all, and that has partially got to do with the dialogue. The writing of a dialogue feels like a bad kids show. Like, so many of the lines that people like Spyro, oh yeah, for some reason old Skylanders are now just regular characters, apparently also then remained relevant to the franchise. Anyway, so many of what lines that Spyro and others say I think are meant to be jokes just fall flat on their face. The usage of characters from previous games also makes part of the stories confuse me a little bit. Let's take this first cutscene of the game where the Doomlander that Chaos has created is shown to be too powerful for Spyro and Stealth, but these new senseis make the Doomlanders leave. Ignore the fact that all the old toys, including ones that have characters in these games, can actually be played as and still kill these guys. Yes, Snuggles has an appearance and
Skylander! Heard you ringing the bell and I came to let you in!
I don't want to talk about it. Speaking of the old toys, the new ones for the senseis are incredibly high quality compared to the previous. They're about the size of the Giants and they are really well detailed, and the texturing and just overall feel are really nice. They each have a class which is kind of important. I'm not going to mention these ever again in relation to these guys. These figures are either completely brand new designs or villains from Trap Team, which I'm indifferent to. It's pretty much the same as old guys being introduced into each game, but from what I've seen, the movesets have changed for Golden Queen, so that's... Wait. If there are no reoccurring old Skylanders, that means there's no new Snuggles. Well, maybe I can make a new one with the other addition, the Creation Crystals. The Creation Crystal, while not feeling as high quality as the senseis, are the other toy you can get. Putting them on the portal allows you to create your own Imaginator, which is practically a build your own Skylanders feature, which is honestly a really cool idea, despite the fact they couldn't really do this with the toys themselves. You have 10 different classes to choose from, which I believe is a pretty sizable amount as they're quite different from what I've seen and played. Even the melee classes feel quite different. Now, the amount of customization you can do with these characters' movesets, you have less overall options than a Mii Fighter and SSBU. Whilst more of a moveset is customizable, there are less options overall. About 10 options in total, which, while it seems like a lot, at the same time, it doesn't. Feels like 3 more overall might be good, or even just like 1 basic attack would be nice since they only have 2 per class, while the other 2 attack options have 4 per class, ignoring the soldier. Since the basic attack is the one you're most likely to use, variety would be appreciated. Now the other aspect of creation, the designing of the Skylander, it's okay, but I feel like it could be a lot better. Firstly, the body. There's no options for body type, aside from the singular one each class has. This kinda sucks because the Snuggles body type is only for the ninja class. I had to make fake Snuggles now supporting 300% more eyes. It would have been nice to even just have the option between a few body type for each class, or even just like 2. There's also just no quadrupedal option, which I think is really weird. The main mascot for Skylanders is Spyro, a dragon on 4 legs. Would have I picked it if it was an option? I don't know, but more variety would help the Skylander you create feel more personal and feel just overall a bit less restrictive on your design. Now, the creation of a design itself is very easy and simple, which is nice. Just pick it and choose your parts, which there are a lot of. However, most of the parts are locked behind a loot box mechanic. You may know how I feel about loot boxes / gacha. This just makes the creation process feel less personal and more restrictive. Now, it's a good thing that what you unlock is transferred between profiles, but most people aren't going to play this game multiple times. It also doesn't help the problem that after even just 3 playthroughs, I'm still missing a significant amount of parts, and I can't even imagine how bad it would be on a first playthrough. It sucks even more because you're most likely to make your Imaginators all right at the start of the game to ensure you aren't using a level 1 Skylander in your penultimate level. I found that, for me at least, after the initial creation I did not change the design very much even after unlocking new parts. I also found that most likely you can buy more Imaginators chests from the console's digital storefront, because if I go into the Imaginite chest, it gives a network error because the eShop got murdered. So I checked the PlayStation store and hey look what I found. Fun! Also, apparently superchargers have microtransactions, which I did not know about. Another thing I do really appreciate is the ability to change the colors of your Skylander to a very large selection of color palettes, and the ability to create your own color palette, which is honestly really awesome. The color selection is very plentiful as well, which is awesome. It really helps make the guy feel more personal, and it helps you not create an abomination by doing random parts with no color matching at all. Finally, you can change the body proportions depending on if you want a little guy or a big man, which is honestly good, and the amount of size things you can change is really great. Whilst there are a lot of flaws with the creation of the Imaginators, the creation overall, I think, it's okay with how it's implemented. Whilst more ability to customize would be appreciated, and no loot box, that would have been hella appreciated. Whilst more ability to customize would be appreciated, I believe what they currently have is okay. How they play in game though? How they play! They play like regular Skylanders, big shock. However, they are much stronger than even just the superchargers. A level 17 fake Snuggles does like 40 damage per shot, while Imposter Snuggles, a character with a similar fire rate, only does 17 at level 20. I hate how these new toys feel so much more powerful than the old ones, because it makes the old toys you've been collecting for the past 5 years feel practically worthless due to this game feeling balanced around the Imaginators and not the old toys. I cannot comment on the senseis though, because I did not play them at all. Oops. Now onto the levels in this game. They are really uninteresting. Whilst the previous game in the series, Skylanders Superchargers, had many cool ideas that were not realized to their full potential, this game had very little cool ideas, and also reuses some concepts from previous games without improving or even feeling like they're doing something new with it. This makes the game kind of just uninteresting overall. I feel like the original game had more unique ideas to this one, or at least the locations looked more unique. The 2 cool ideas it does has is this beachy area with a vortex you go inside near the end, and the abandoned amusement park. While I'm not a fan of the second one's concept, they both have a lot of potential. In the vortex, you can have different islands flying everywhere, and maybe even do some platforming on just different platforms at different angles, or that are just flying around. Or even just have random ronks and other gunk nearly meteor at you, which could be cool, or even just something that has any effect on gameplay at all. Instead, all that happens is a lightning hits a few small islands with pretty much no threat of dying or harm. This could have been cool if you got hit by the debris from the islands, making there be some effect on gameplay. However, in its current state, it is just uninteresting. When you go inside the vortex itself, it just feels like the rest of the level and doesn't really have anything signifying where an area affected by a tornado / vortex aside from the background. Now, the abandoned amusement park. This level really annoys me. It does absolutely nothing with its premise at all besides this one ship and these rotating submarines. Otherwise, it does literally nothing to capitalize on the theme park theme. There is No rocking boats like they have to do a puzzle on, or like a roller coaster where you have to dodge incoming rail cars, or just like anything. Leaning slightly more into the horror element that they attempted at the start and the word abandoned insinuates. Make the atmosphere more unnerving, or just something to help stick this level out in players' mind. The levels that repeat other concepts from previously in the series are just not better than the original, or just do nothing new. The two levels that repeat the old concepts, Bizland, which just does nothing interesting or new with the world change that Wilikin village had, and the Dragon Temple does the choice picking thing of the Oracle, probably my favorite level in Giants, but with only 2 options, which are nowhere near as interesting of questions that the Oracle asks. The Dragon Temple's 2 questions are, would you rather have brains or brawn? Are you taking the path of fire or ice? That's nowhere near as interesting as the would you rather save the princess or catch the thief that the Oracle provides. A lot of the levels in this game feel long as well, and overall just aren't that great or fun. I cannot tell you why though. Maybe it's a lack of enemy variety, as each enemy in each level feels similar and there are only like 3 enemies in each level, but I'm just not sure. The way these levels are connected this time around, well, they exist like the first games where the entire world is connected together, but in a significantly inferior form. The first game had pretty much all levels be somewhat connected to the core of light, whether it be walking across a bridge, up a beanstalk. The world felt interconnected by the travel methods you needed to get to the levels. You'd think this would make the world seem smaller, which it somewhat does. However, the wide variety of locals, and the fact that you see from the first few levels where you fly to the different levels, or even just like the ship ones, that this world has so much more from beyond what has been connected, which leads to it still feeling relatively large and open for expansion. However, this world map just leaves the world feeling much smaller and more cramped. Creates a feeling that this is all of Skylands, considering it's meant to be a world map. It creates more of a feeling that everything in Skylands is in this one area, which just isn't great. This game also somehow has filler levels? Filler. It has filler. And for some reason, one of these little filler things I did was the best level in the game. It had puzzles which didn't feel overly easy, it had a different atmosphere, and I actually quite enjoyed it. Yeah, I know, it's really weird. For some reason, some of the levels in their little preview thing just don't really match, specifically the one with the vortex, and it's really off-putting. You're also not, like, shrunken down at all, or at least you don't feel shrunk down since the models stay the same way, unlike something like an older RPG where your little pixel character will get, like, smaller and it'll make the scene feel more zoomed out. So this world map overall is it just feels weird. Especially when Kels is just chilling less than a minute away from the academy. The bosses in this game suck. I'm great at transitions. Every level has a boss at pretty much the end of the level, and they're Kels' Doomlanders, an evil version of each Imaginator types, except Sentinels. I guess he just hates Sentinels. They're honestly kind of just boring and lame. They don't really interest me personally since they all look somewhat generic. I feel like it's meant to be like the first game bosses, where you fight different Skylanders but in a shadow form. That works though, because the Skylanders have a defined moveset and form, and overall that game just had a better boss design. These guys have 3 different phases, but only the final phase is actually fun sometimes. The first 2 phases are just so basic and often not very challenging. The first phase of each boss has a singular attack, which is just not very engaging. The second phase adds a second attack. Ooh, how scary. It's usually not that much better than the first one. Then the final one just adds some hazard, usually from the level, which sometimes didn't even affect how I played because it wasn't really an obstacle. Honestly, besides the second boss, because it felt like a Dark Souls boss I was put into a Skylanders game, none of these bosses are that memorable. I will forget about 90% of these within a month. I feel like the only proof you need to see how subpar these bosses are is the fact that in the final boss where Kels turns into Goku, what? For his first phase, he summons like 3 or 4 of these guys all at once, and it isn't some overwhelming unfair challenge. I feel like that kind of proves these guys' incompetence as bosses. Before I talk about the final boss, I should mention the other 2 bosses who aren't like this and both suck. Firstly, it's this sea monster. His attacks are just too slow and has a similar problem to most of Swap Force's bosses, where you have to wait for their attack cycle to finish before you can attack them, which quite often isn't very fun, and in this case, it isn't very fun. The other one is a massive guacamole monster where you have to do this on-rail shooter thing where you travel in a circle and try to attack him. This alternate playstyle just isn't that fun for me because having to press A to turn around and just the restrictive movement just doesn't appeal to me that much. Now, the final boss. Honestly, might be the best boss in this game, and the first final boss for ages which wasn't underwhelming or just straight up bad. The first phase where he summons a lot of Doomlanders is honestly quite fun because they, as a collective, feel like they pose an actual threat, however, they don't feel unfair. The final few phases actually have some cool stuff to them. Chaos still summons Doomlanders, but it's mainly to do with their primary attack and then they just disappear. And it's like they're his attack himself. This is honestly a really cool way to implement the bosses into the final boss while keeping them feeling somewhat fresh. Especially when they're all in a circle, that was great. So, overall, a decent ending to an otherwise subpar game. I feel like this is the worst Skylanders game in the series. It doesn't have a single level I would consider to be good. At best, they're okay. Even that final boss came after a level I wasn't a big fan of. After this entry into Skylanders and a few level packs got released for it, Activision decided to pretty much end any future plans for Skylanders games, which is unfortunate but inevitable. I still have a lot of respect for the Skylanders series, despite it only being like 6 out of 10 collectively. If you want a ranking on the games, specifically the versions I played, Imaginators Swap Force, Superchargers Giants, Trap Team Spyro's Adventure. However, those last two would probably be swapped if I played the Wii U version of Trap Team. So, I guess that's the end of this retrospective. Imaginators was the final game released. However, what if I told you there was one more Skylanders project that outlived the games themselves? One thing I view as major enough that I feel like I have to cover it.